Hello, my name is Greg Nutter, and I'm a management consultant helping business owners and senior sales leaders solve revenue growth problems in both direct and indirect sales channels. I'm also the author of the Amazon best-selling book, P3 Selling, The Essentials of B2B Selling Success. The best advice I ever had was early in my career when my manager took me aside and told me that consistent sales success is all related to process, less art, more science. And it was this realization that has helped me not only to excel in my own career, but enabled me to manage, coach, train hundreds of sales reps to be consistently more successful.
Less art, more science in sales. Wow, that's an interesting thing. I actually talked about that this morning when I was training a sales team. So tell me about that. How does that show up for you, Greg? How did that show up in your career?
Well, the reality is selling to businesses is a pretty complicated task. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of steps. And if you just rely on winging it, on gut feel, um, you're going to win maybe 20% of the deals. So people who have a methodical approach to align what they're doing to what the client is doing, where they are in the purchasing process, is really a formula for success. And I found that over and over that people are doing the wrong things at the wrong time, and they just have mediocre performance. They just don't reach that top echelon of I'm knocking it out every quarter, every year.
Yeah, I've found the same, right? I think, a lot of people think it's all art. Oh, you have to be outgoing, or you have to be this, or you have to be that. And certainly that's not the case. I've coached the most introverted sales reps as well as the most extroverted. And the common thread is the adherence to a process. And one of the things that I really resonate with is you said early in your book around that process thing, another thing that was a bit contrary to what many people would say, and that is business people don't buy products or services; they buy solutions to their problems. And I think that, along with process, if we understood those two truths, I think we'd be further along as sales reps. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. Too often, I'm sure you get it. I'm sure a lot of our other people get these, prospecting emails all the time that say, I've got a great product. We're the best company. You need to talk to us. And in the absence of a problem or an opportunity that somebody actually wants to solve, um, the idea of a product or feature makes no sense. How much is it? Who cares, right? So it's that context of a problem that somebody says they want to solve or an opportunity they want to capture. Once you've established that, then you can sort of start talking about product. And we do it all the time. We do it in our prospecting, we do it in our sales calls. Um, and it's just really, it takes the conversation to what I call clerking rather than selling, right? We all understand clerking when we go into a grocery store or electronics store or something, and they do what I call the two-step, which is let me give you some information, then I ask for the order, right? And if you don't give them the order, then they say, well, let me give you some more information, and then ask the order. So they'll say, hey, you know what, it's the old, fries are on sale this week, would you like me to add them to your order? We don't have this in stock for very much longer. You probably want to buy that today, right? So that's how clerking works. You talk about a product and then you ask for the order. But real business selling starts with the context of a problem or an opportunity that somebody's agreed that they want to fix.
Yeah, I think that's so right on. I love in the book how well you lay that out. The book is super, super helpful and and I mean this in a good way. It's very simple. Like there's not lot of complicated concepts there that whether you're an experienced seller or whether you're a new seller that you're not going to get your arms around. And I really like that about the book. I thought that was important. With that, let's talk about your P's, right? So the first P is the problem, right? I mean, that makes so much sense. Verifying your prospect sees this as a problem. And I love that you say in here, and then we'll talk about this, and that is, you said, just because you uncovered a problem does not mean that your prospect will do anything about them. A problem must be urgent or it won't be solved, and it must be impactful if it want it to be solved. So break that down for us, Greg. Where does that kind of show up? Because I don't hear that from a lot of folks. Maybe not in those words.
Yeah. So if you look at a high level and you ask yourself, what do sellers do? There's really three high level behaviors. I seek to understand, I seek to influence, and then I message back, either based on what you've told me or on the areas that I've influenced you. So in the first P, problems, that's where you want to understand the problems they're trying to address, understand what I call the importance, which is a product of impact times the urgency. And they're different. There's sometimes problems that have a lot of impact, but they're not that urgent. We'll get to that next year, maybe the year after. Or you have something that's really urgent. I got to get it done by this, but it's got a small value associated. And the third thing that's really important when you're trying to understand, influence, and message is a quantification of that problem. How much is that worth? I would like to use the bracketing tactic, which is that a $50,000 problem, a $500,000 problem, or a $5 million problem, right? And once I know kind of what that is, I can justify in my solution now to say, well, that's a $500,000 problem. If I've got a $100,000 product, then that's a no-brainer. But if I've got a $5 million product and it's a $500,000 problem, I need to be looking for more problems. And it's like you're panning for gold and you're putting these nuggets away until you get enough to justify not just the cost of your solution, but as we all know, buying a lot of solutions today is a hassle. It's a risk. It's a lot of work. So you got to come in with a quantification that exceeds the dollar number that you're asking for. And so those are the three things within problem that you're really looking at. A problem, and ideally some that you can solve better than the competition, perspectives on the importance, and lastly, a quantification of how big that problem or those problems are.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you saying all of that, because when we put it in that plane of terms, it's like, well, why are we not doing that? So do you have a suggestion, Greg, on why our sellers aren't doing that more often? Why sales pros aren't going after those things?
Yeah, I got to give you a story way back in my days with Xerox. I have a lot of stories from them, but there was one where a few of us were sitting in a boardroom and we were talking about, sales skills and, business acumen. That was a big one on the table. And so what we did is we drew a graph. On the vertical axis, we put business acumen from low to high. On the y-axis, the horizontal axis, we put tenure with the company. And you know what the graph looked like? We said, what do you think it looks like? And it was like a sloping from the top left to the bottom. We were training business acumen out of people. When they first came in, whether they were from university or they had a relatively high level of business acumen. And the reason that happens is because if you look at the training that most people get within companies today, it's all product training. It's about, here's my new product. Here's some new features. Here's how that product compares to the competition. Here's a new industry report about how our product is so great. Here's our customer satisfaction numbers, right? And so because they see so much product day in, day out, they think that's what I'm supposed to talk about, right? That's my message when I prospect. That's my message when I'm on my first call. Let me tell you how great we are, right? And so I think we squeeze the business acumen out of people, and that's why people lead with product, not problems and opportunities.
So how do we fix that though, Greg? That sounds, I mean, that makes sense to me, because I hear that all the time. As I train, right now I'm inside an organization. The training that we give is absolutely very product focused and very little about the industry. So how do
Yep.
we shift that?
Well, one of the things you do is certainly there's some training involved, and like you pointed out, there's a lot of sales methodologies that are complicated. In fact, there's a guy who left me a great review on Amazon who does sales training for Accenture. Um, and he said, the problem with a lot of sales methodologies are they're way too complex. And so 2 weeks after someone's left the training, they can't remember them. They remember this fancy jargon. That was a fun term, but they forget how to use these tools. So I think we need a methodology that's approachable, that's simple, but even then it's not easy. The second step is you got to coach to it. You look at a lot of sales managers when they look at a deal and they'll say, so when's that going to close? What are the next steps? Right? What are you doing to close that? I'd turn it around and I'd say, what are the problems you're trying to solve? What are the opportunities you can't capture? What's the perspective on how important those are? And have you quantified them? Right? And then you go to the second P. So who are the people that are involved? How many of them do you know? How many do you know their perspectives on the problem? And then you look at process, which is where are they not in the selling process? Where are they in the buying process? And therefore, what activities do you have that align to where they are, as opposed to, well, we just did the demo, so we're ready to propose, right? So I think it's asking those questions and coaching to the methodology that then people start thinking, oh, this is how I need to sell.
Yeah, coach to the principle, then
Right.
coach the person, and then eventually coach the product, right?
Yeah. I had a great realization again back in my days at Xerox. I was a sales trainer for a while, and we had something called I don't know, it was the global directive or whatever they called it on Star Trek. But the idea is you didn't interfere, right? You watched. And as a sales manager, you watch different things than when you're a sales trainer. As a sales manager, you watch the deal. Is it moving away from us? Is it moving closer to us? Are we losing it? And then you jump in and try and save it. As a sales trainer, you watch the interaction, right? Did we uncover problems? Did we uncover more? Did we uncover the impact of them, right? So you're looking to see, are they doing the right sales tasks rather than watching, are we, just moving the deal? Are we forward and back? And that was a big aha moment for me, is that, it was watching the interaction rather than watching the deals.
I like that. That's so smart. Star Trek called it the Prime Directive,
That's
right?
what
To
it
do no
was.
harm and to step in. We have that as sales managers too. I like that. So Greg, when you talked in the book about the people, I like that you kind of and it made sense. Of course, that you made it the two, and that is you said there's problem people and process people. So
Mm.
take me through those, because I think sometimes we get those confused or we forget that there are two different types of people. So what's a problem person?
Yeah. Problem person is someone who has the problem that you have uncovered. They have that problem of my costs are too high, or my service is too slow, or I'm not going to make my numbers this year. So there's somebody that has that problem. Now they have different perspectives. One of the things we point out with problem people is that they often have a perspective not only of the importance of that problem, but they have a perspective of the ways to solve that problem. It's like, I'm just going to get my brother-in-law involved, and because he's got some product in this area, right? And if you don't know their perspectives of the problem, you can't influence them, right? Too often, we have a key contact. I remember a long time ago, we were putting together this large account management process within Xerox. And it had this first line, it said, "Who's your key contact?" And I looked at this and go, what? Right? It's like there's more and more people involved in a sale today. I think I said like 10 years ago, there were like 3 or 4. 5 years ago, there's like 7 to 10. These days, even for like 50 million, $100 million companies, there's up to 10 people involved. And too often as sellers, we focus on our key contact and he'll tell me all I need to know. So you got to sit down and say, who's got the problem? What do they think of the problem? And what are their perspectives on it? And the more you identify and the more you can get to, it's a numbers game. The greater chance that you have of winning. If you get to 80% of them or 75% of them and your competition gets to 1 or 2, you got a much better chance of winning that deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Multi-threading is a great way to close deals for sure. More is better. So do you believe, do you have to match them up? Like I've been in organizations where if they bring in the CIO, we're bringing in our CIO. If they bring in the head of HR, we're bringing in the head of HR. Do you believe that's
Yeah.
important as well, or numbers wise? How does that work?
There's in the book, I talk about 3 key strategies. The first and the most effective strategy to get connected to somebody is to get a referral from somebody who's credible. Now, that person could be within the company, but they could be external. Maybe the CEO's got a great relationship with somebody who sells something collaborative with yours, and have them reach out and say, hey, Greg's got some really great ideas. I think you really should sit down with him. So getting a referral is the most powerful one. The second one is exactly what you said, matching up. Is that, hey, you'll say to your key contact, hey, just so you know, we have a policy in our company. We like to make sure we have relationships at all levels. So my boss is going to be calling your boss, and his boss is going to be calling your CEO. So don't be alarmed. We just want to make sure that we fully understand the situation that you're in before we, propose something as impactful as what we are. Social media is also a great way to do it. The key in getting connected on whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or something else is to be relevant. How many requests do you get every day that says, hi, Greg, I noticed you're connected to Bob and Mary, and I'm connected to Bob and Mary, so I thought we should be connected as well, right? So I go like, what's in it for me, right? But if you could do something like, Phil, I want to get connected to you because we're working on a deal with your company, and in case you want to reach out and get some more information, I want to make sure that you have easy access to me, right? So make sure that connection is a what's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for you. And that's another great way to try and get connected to people.
Good. Yeah. It's so funny. I get so many garbage attempts every single day that it makes me laugh. And I wonder sometimes if the amount of noise is worth it for buyers, right? Especially because as a sales trainer, I have nothing to sell, right? I'm out there, I'm connecting, I'm trying to understand people. I'm non-threatening. And yet people pitch me all the time. And I'm like, I'm not buying anything. I'm also not selling anything. Don't know why you're talking to me, but okay, that's interesting, right? I mean, because there's no relevancy. The relevancy is missing. So I think that's good. So how do you mentioned in the book that we should look for people that are more active, right? People that have an opinion on social. So talk a little bit more about that, because that's where I like to spend a good amount of time.
I'll talk about 2 concepts. One is we introduced the concept of decision influence. So decision influence, the idea is that, there's a lot of people involved in a decision, but some people's vote carries more weight than others, right? And we have a very simple model of assessing decision influence. It has to do with a person's motivation and their power. So power could be political power or internal influence power. And we talked about problem people, but there's also the process people, the people in purchasing, the people in legal, people in accounting, right? Who don't really care about the problem per se. Largely, it doesn't affect them, but they can be deeply wedded to this clause in my RFP, and there is nobody that's going to take that away, right? So they're highly motivated, and they've got a certain amount of political power, and you need to know who they are, right? So when you're looking at people, you need to assess their decision influence, because that's how you prioritize who you need to see and who you can kind of maybe give a miss on. But the other person we talk about, particularly in corporate sales, is this individual, or sometimes it's a group that we call instigators. There's a lot of people who love going around and kicking off new projects. Hey, you know what? We haven't changed out our carpet in years, or updated the lobby, or changed our logo, right? Or updated our website. And these people, whether they have the problem or not, they're just like serial instigators, and they'll go around kicking off problems. And so, or if you've got your key contact and you found some problems, but your key contact can't seem to quite get traction, try to get enough people, enough momentum to get the problem. If you start looking for these instigators, sometimes they'll help you get this project kickstarted.
Cool. I need to look for more of those some days for some projects. They've got the energy, right? They're excitable,
Yep.
and they're going to help. They're going to drive some urgency, or at least some forward momentum.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Well, your last P, you mentioned process there a little bit, but one of the things that I thought was a very interesting take, and you said the selling process must follow the buying process, not the other way around. Well, I've always heard. I want to, they're going to run my process. So talk to me about that. How that works out.
Well, example I like to give is look at your CRM system. It looks like this: prospect, discovery, proposal. Let's say, sorry, maybe demo, or proposal, close, right? And I don't care what CRM system you're looking at, but you ask yourself, is that what the customer's doing, or the prospect's doing, or is that what the seller's doing? They're almost always in terms of what the seller's doing. But the seller doesn't drive the process, the buyer does. The buyer has a set of steps that they go through. There's 5. And it's not just companies, but individuals go through these 5 stages. It's been very well documented. And if you don't let them go through these stages, you're going to get an objection at the end. You're going to get pushback at the end, right? And so the key is to understand where are they individually and as a company within those 5 stages of a buying process, and then align your activities so you help them achieve the objectives of that stage, and then feel comfortable about moving into the next stage. It's like you don't introduce new features or when somebody's just about to put pen to paper, right? It's like, maybe we need to look at those new features, right? Or this new release is coming up, or something, new product. At the same time, when somebody hasn't made a decision to even solve the problem, coming up with pricing and a proposal just makes you look silly, right? I didn't say I was going to solve this problem. Why does he give me a proposal? A lot of times they'll tell you, well, why don't you go give me a proposal? But that's a way of making you go away, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So it's important to first understand the stages that a company and a prospect go through, figuring out where they are in that stage, figuring out how well you're aligned and positioned. Are we in a good stage with regard to the steps that they're going to go through? And then figuring out what are the best things that we can be doing right now to improve our position and move things forward. fact, I have a couple tables that I provide in the book, and people actually can go to my website and download these tables, which are really helpful in taking the mystery out of it. So if a sales manager says, "Where are you in the buying process?" and a rep says, "I'm here," then you can validate. Well, has the customer done this? Has the prospect done this? What have they done to make you believe that they're at that stage? So it's watching the prospect's behaviors. And that tells you where you are and what you should be doing. And it's a big mistake I think a lot of sellers make. They're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time.
I agree. I agree. Sequencing matters. We have to do
Mm-hmm.
things the right way for our buyer. Otherwise, they're definitely going to object. They're like, whoa, hold on. I'm not there yet. Or,
Right,
wow, I'm way ahead of you. And what are we doing here? And either
right,
way, it's a mismatch for sure.
right,
For
right.
sure. So cool. Well, Greg, I love your book, man. It is super simple. I love the playbook at the back. We could talk for hours about the playbook, and you've got just such great stuff. It's so rich in here. It's not just about the tactics and a strategy. You've really got it nicely laid out here. So
Thank
congratulations
you.
for that. You're welcome. You're welcome. So with that, Greg, if you were to give us two last points, one for buyers and one for sellers and one for sales leaders, on how they can get started doing better sales, how they can get started along the P3 selling journey, what would that be, Greg?
I find the most powerful thing that a sales rep could do today that will have the most impact on how they're perceived is start focusing on solving problems and not on pitching product. That will immediately have your prospect go, this guy's different or this girl's different. They've come to me helping me find problems to fix or opportunities to solve. It immediately changes your perspective, or the prospect's perspective about the value you can bring to them rather than just talking about yourself. So that's the number one. For sales leaders, I think they need to be asking questions around where the deal really is, based on what the prospect is doing, not what the seller is doing. It doesn't matter what the seller is doing; it matters what the prospect is doing, and ensure that the rep is doing the right things that align to where that prospect is. I think those are the two most important things.
Awesome. Love that. Get more solution and problem focused, and then leaders understand where the deal is according to your prospect. Great advice. Friends, if you want to get more from Greg, go ahead and go to p3selling.com, the letter P, the number 3 selling.com. Get a copy of Greg's book, P3 Selling, The Essentials of B2B Sales Success, and learn some more from Greg. Greg, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight today, for sharing your book, and for just putting it out there in ways that sellers as well as sales managers can understand.
Thanks, Phil. Really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure.